That tractor is older than most of my employees." The woman laughed as Wyoming wind swept across the open prairie, carrying dust and the scent of fresh earth beneath a wide blue sky. Rebecca Hayes stepped out of a black luxury SUV and adjusted the sleeve of her elegant white jacket. As chief executive officer of Hayes Agricultural Group, she had spent years evaluating farms, ranches, and agricultural operations across the country. She believed she could understand almost everything important about a property within the first 5 minutes. Standing 50 yards away beside a faded green tractor was a man who immediately challenged that confidence. Cole Dawson rested one hand on the machine's weathered frame while studying a fence line stretching toward the horizon. He was around 40 years old, broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair and the kind of calm expression that seemed untouched by pressure. Nothing about him looked wealthy. His boots showed signs of real work. His denim shirt was clean but worn. The tractor beside him appeared old enough to belong in a museum. Rebecca walked closer. "You still run this place with that?" she asked. Cole glanced at the machine and smiled. "Most days. I am surprised it still starts. So am I sometimes." A few members of Rebecca's team laughed politely. Cole did not appear offended. He simply returned his attention to the fence. The reaction confused her slightly. Most ranch owners became defensive when outsiders criticized their operation. Cole seemed completely comfortable. Around them, thousands of acres of rolling grassland stretched beneath endless Wyoming skies. Cattle grazed in distant fields. Windmills turned slowly on the horizon. The ranch looked successful enough, but not extraordinary. Certainly not important enough to attract the attention of a major corporation. Rebecca opened a tablet displaying maps and development plans. Hayes Agricultural Group was exploring several large land acquisitions for a future agricultural expansion project. Many neighboring ranch owners had already expressed interest in selling. Cole Dawson was one of the final holdouts. "You own this entire section?" she asked. "Part of it." Another simple answer. Another mystery. Rebecca studied him carefully. Something about his confidence felt unusual. Not arrogant. Not performative. Just steady. The kind of confidence people developed when they no longer needed approval from anyone. Before she could ask another question, a small pickup truck approached across a dirt road. A young girl climbed out carrying a backpack almost as large as herself. Her face brightened immediately when she spotted Cole. "Dad," she called. Cole's entire expression changed. The reserved rancher disappeared, replaced by a warm smile. "How was school, Emma?" The girl ran toward him and launched into an enthusiastic explanation about a science project. Cole listened with complete attention, as though nothing else in the world mattered. Rebecca watched quietly. For a moment, the massive land deal, the business projections, and the corporate negotiations seemed very far away. Then one of her advisors approached holding paperwork. "We should continue reviewing the property boundaries." Rebecca nodded. As she turned back toward Cole, she noticed something strange. Several local ranchers driving along the county road slowed down to wave at him. A county sheriff's truck passed, and the deputy tipped his hat. Even the manager from the nearby feed supplier stopped briefly just to shake Cole's hand. Everyone seemed to know him. Everyone seemed to respect him. Yet standing beside that aging tractor beneath the Wyoming sun, he still looked like the last person anyone would expect to hold a secret. And neither Rebecca nor her team had any idea that the old machine beside him had spent decades working land connected to one of the largest ranch legacies in the entire state. The next morning began long before sunrise. A pale silver glow rested on the Wyoming horizon while cold air drifted across the open range. Most of the county was still asleep when Cole Dawson stepped onto the porch carrying a mug of coffee. The world around him felt quiet except for the distant sounds of cattle and the steady whisper of wind moving through the grasslands. He stood there for a moment watching the first light touch the hills before beginning another day. Inside the house, Emma sat at the kitchen table finishing homework she had forgotten the night before. "You should have reminded me," she said. Cole smiled while preparing breakfast. "I did." Emma narrowed her eyes. "You should have reminded me louder." Cole laughed softly. Their home was simple and comfortable. Family photographs covered the walls. School awards sat on a bookshelf beside old ranch records, and weathered leather journals passed down through generations. Nothing about the house suggested extraordinary wealth. Everything suggested history. After breakfast, Cole drove Emma to school in an aging pickup truck that looked nearly as old as the tractor Rebecca had mocked the previous day. Students streamed through the front entrance carrying backpacks while parents exchanged morning greetings. As soon as Cole parked, several teachers waved to him. The principal crossed the parking lot to shake his hand. "Thank you again for helping with the auditorium repairs," she said. "Happy to help," Cole replied. Emma smiled proudly. To her, moments like that were completely normal. After dropping her off, Cole headed back toward the ranch. The day quickly filled with work. He inspected fences damaged by recent weather, checked irrigation equipment, met with ranch hands, reviewed livestock reports. Every task received the same level of attention. There was no audience, no publicity, just responsibility. Around noon, Rebecca Hayes arrived in the nearby town for another series of meetings regarding her company's expansion plans. The town itself was small. One main street, a few local businesses, a diner that seemed to know every resident by name. As Rebecca entered a coffee shop, she overheard two ranchers discussing land issues. One of them mentioned Cole. "If Dawson thinks it is a bad idea, I would pay attention." The other immediately nodded. Rebecca looked up from her tablet. Later that afternoon, she heard the name again while speaking with a local banker. "Cole has always looked after this county," the banker said casually. "People trust him." Rebecca frowned slightly. "Why?" The banker seemed surprised by the question. "Because he has earned it." Before she could ask more, another customer interrupted the conversation. Throughout the day, the pattern continued. At the feed store, at the equipment supplier, at the local diner. People spoke about Cole with a level of respect usually reserved for public officials or major business leaders. Yet none of them described him as wealthy. They described him as dependable, honest, fair. As sunset approached, Rebecca found herself driving past the Dawson Ranch once more. In the fading golden light, she spotted Cole and Emma repairing a section of fence together. They laughed about something she could not hear. The scene felt simple, ordinary. Yet Rebecca could not shake the growing feeling that she was missing something important. Because the more she learned about Cole Dawson, the less he resembled the struggling rancher she thought she had met. And somewhere beneath the quiet rhythm of ranch life, a much larger story was waiting to be uncovered. By the end of the week, Rebecca Hayes had spent more time thinking about Cole Dawson than she cared to admit. It was not because he had impressed her with wealth, status, or influence. In fact, she had seen none of those things. What unsettled her was something far more difficult to explain. Every person she met seemed to respect him, yet nobody spoke about him the way people usually talked about successful ranch owners. They spoke about him as though he were part of the foundation holding the entire county together. The pattern continued during a breakfast meeting at the town diner. Rebecca sat reviewing development plans while local residents filled the room with conversation. At a nearby table, two teachers discussed a scholarship fund that helped graduating seniors attend college. Cole made sure the program survived when funding disappeared, one teacher said. The other nodded. "He always does." Rebecca looked up from her coffee. An hour later, she visited the county agricultural office. The purpose was simple. She wanted a better understanding of regional land use before moving forward with her company's expansion strategy. Maps covered the walls. Historical records filled metal cabinets. During the discussion, one official casually mentioned a severe drought several years earlier. "That could have devastated local ranchers," Rebecca observed. "It would have," the official replied, "if Dawson had not coordinated emergency water access." Rebecca frowned. "Dawson? Cole?" The man smiled. "Half the county still talks about it." Once again, there was no mention of money, no mention of ownership, only respect. Later that afternoon, Rebecca attended a livestock association meeting where ranchers discussed market conditions and transportation issues. She expected technical conversations about cattle and supply chains. Instead, she found herself hearing Cole's name again. A younger rancher stood before the group explaining how his family business had survived a difficult financial period. "I would not still be here without Cole's advice," he admitted. Several people nodded in agreement. Rebecca listened carefully. The mystery deepened. How could one man influence so many lives while appearing to seek no recognition for it? As the meeting ended, she stepped outside into the cool Wyoming evening. Across the street stood the county sheriff talking with several residents. When the sheriff noticed her, he walked over. "You are with Hayes Agricultural Group, right?" Rebecca nodded. "That is right." The sheriff glanced toward the distant hills. Good people around here. I am beginning to notice that. He smiled. Especially Dawson. Rebecca laughed softly. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it is true. The sheriff's expression turned thoughtful. You know, some people earn respect because of what they own. Others earn it because of what they protect. Before Rebecca could ask what he meant, the sheriff was called away. The words stayed with her long after he left. That evening, as sunset painted the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and orange, Rebecca drove toward the Dawson Ranch. She was not there for a formal meeting. At least that was what she told herself. From a distance, she saw Cole standing beside the same old tractor while Emma sat on the fence nearby doing homework. The two laughed about something as cattle moved slowly across the pasture behind them. It looked like an ordinary scene. A father, a daughter, a ranch. Yet Rebecca could no longer shake the feeling that she was looking at only a small piece of a much larger picture. Because in every direction she turned, the quiet rancher with the aging tractor seemed to leave behind a trail of respect that money alone could never buy. The following week brought the first serious obstacle to Hayes Agricultural Group's expansion plans. What had looked like a straightforward acquisition project suddenly became far more complicated. Rebecca Hayes sat inside a temporary field office reviewing maps spread across a large conference table. Thousands of acres had already been secured through agreements with neighboring landowners. On paper, everything appeared to be moving forward. In reality, one critical section remained unresolved. Without it, the entire project would lose efficiency. One of her advisors pointed toward the center of the map. This is the problem. Rebecca leaned closer. The highlighted parcels formed a strategic corridor connecting several key properties. Who owns them, she asked. Several families. Then let us negotiate. The advisor exchanged an uncertain look with another consultant. We tried. Rebecca frowned. And most of them said they would not make a decision until they spoke with Cole Dawson. The room fell silent. Once again, the same name appeared. Rebecca stared at the map. Why would ranch owners wait for his opinion? Nobody offered a complete answer. Later that afternoon, she drove to the county meeting hall where local landowners had gathered to discuss water rights, grazing access, and future development. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. Ranchers sat in folding chairs while county officials reviewed documents at the front of the room. Rebecca noticed Cole standing near the back speaking quietly with several families. There was no spotlight on him, no official title displayed beside his name. Yet people naturally gravitated toward him. When questions arose, they looked toward him. When disagreements surfaced, they listened when he spoke. During the discussion, a consultant representing Hayes Agricultural Group presented projections showing economic benefits for the region. New jobs, infrastructure improvements, additional investment. The presentation was professional and convincing. Most attendees listened respectfully. Then a ranch owner raised a concern about long-term water management. Another questioned transportation routes. A third worried about land stewardship. The room became increasingly divided. Rebecca prepared to step in. Before she could, Cole calmly stood. May I ask something? The room immediately quieted. He walked toward the maps displayed at the front. For several minutes, he studied them carefully. Then he pointed to a section of the proposed development area. These numbers assume average rainfall conditions. The consultant nodded. Correct. Cole looked up. What happens during a 5-year drought cycle? The consultant hesitated. Several ranchers exchanged glances. Cole continued. And what happens to the downstream grazing leases if these access routes change? More silence. Rebecca watched closely. His questions were precise. Technical. Strategic. Not the kind of questions she expected from a rancher operating an aging tractor. One by one, additional concerns emerged. Not because Cole opposed the project. Because he understood its consequences better than anyone else in the room. After the meeting ended, people gathered around him seeking advice. Rebecca remained where she was, watching from across the hall. The scene felt strangely familiar. She had seen executives command attention in boardrooms. She had seen investors influence entire industries. Yet the respect surrounding Cole felt different. It was not based on authority. It was based on trust. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Rebecca finally approached him. You understand development planning remarkably well, she said. Cole smiled slightly. Land has a long memory. That is an interesting answer. It is also a true one. The evening sun streamed through the windows behind him, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. For a moment, Rebecca felt as though she were standing in front of a man carrying knowledge far older and far larger than the ranch she could see. And somewhere inside the growing puzzle surrounding Cole Dawson, another piece had just fallen into place. Rebecca Hayes had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, managed corporate mergers, and overseen operations across multiple states, yet nothing frustrated her more than not understanding someone. Over the following days, that frustration centered entirely on Cole Dawson. Every answer she uncovered seemed to create 3 new questions. The rancher who drove an aging pickup truck somehow possessed expertise that rivaled the consultants she paid hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. The father who spent mornings fixing fences could discuss long-term water management better than many industry analysts. And the man who never spoke about success seemed to know more about large-scale agricultural development than some executives running major corporations. One afternoon, Rebecca arranged a meeting with several specialists reviewing the proposed expansion project. Engineers, environmental planners, legal advisors, and agricultural economists gathered around a large conference table inside the regional operations office. Detailed maps covered the walls. Charts and forecasts filled computer screens. The discussion focused on regulatory approvals and future land use. Halfway through the meeting, one advisor raised a concern regarding grazing access corridors and water distribution rights. The room immediately became complicated. Several experts offered different interpretations. Rebecca listened carefully. Then she noticed something unusual. One of the proposed solutions directly contradicted a recommendation Cole had made during the county meeting. Curious, she asked the team to run additional projections. 20 minutes later, the results appeared. Cole had been right. The revised models showed significantly lower long-term risk. The room grew quiet. An environmental consultant leaned back in his chair. Who originally suggested that adjustment? Rebecca hesitated. A local rancher. The consultant laughed. Then that rancher understands regional resource management better than most firms in this industry. The comment stayed with her. Later that evening, Rebecca drove toward the Dawson Ranch under a sky painted with deep shades of orange and gold. She told herself the visit was related to business. Deep down, she knew that was only part of the reason. When she arrived, she found Cole repairing an irrigation control system while Emma sat nearby reading a library book. The scene looked peaceful against the backdrop of rolling Wyoming grasslands. "You work a lot," Rebecca said as she approached. Cole smiled without looking up. "So do you. That is different. Is it?" She considered the question. For a moment neither spoke. Wind moved gently through the tall grass surrounding them. Cattle grazed in distant pastures. Emma turned a page and continued reading. Eventually Rebecca pointed toward the irrigation controls. "How did you learn all of this?" Cole tightened a fitting and stood. "Which part?" "Water systems, development planning, land law, agricultural economics." Cole laughed softly. "That is more than one question." "I noticed." His smile faded into thoughtful silence. "When your family spends generations caring for land, you learn that everything is connected." Rebecca studied him. Most people would hire experts. Experts are important, but responsibility cannot be outsourced. The answer sounded simple, yet it carried unusual weight. Before she could ask another question, a call came through on her phone. One of her executives sounded concerned. Several land agreements tied to the expansion project had unexpectedly stalled. Important approvals were being delayed. The situation was becoming increasingly complicated. Rebecca ended the call and looked toward the horizon. Something larger was beginning to move beneath the surface of the project. As she glanced back at Cole, she noticed he was watching the sunset with the calm expression of someone who already understood pieces of the puzzle she had not yet discovered. And for the first time, she began to suspect that the true story behind Dawson Ranch was far bigger than the ranch itself. The deeper Rebecca Hayes looked into the expansion project, the stranger the situation became. What had started as a routine acquisition effort was now tangled in delays, approvals, and ownership questions that seemed to trace back through decades of Wyoming history. One Monday morning, she arrived at the regional office before sunrise. Coffee steamed beside her laptop while stacks of land records covered the conference table. Outside the windows, the first light of day touched the distant mountains. Inside, Rebecca was focused on one question. Why did so many important decisions appear connected to land surrounding Dawson Ranch? Her legal team had spent the weekend reviewing county archives and historical property documents. By mid-morning, several boxes of records had been delivered from the county clerk's office. Some were modern. Others were old enough to show signs of age along the edges. Rebecca opened the first file expecting routine ownership information. Instead, she found the Dawson name appearing repeatedly, decade after decade, generation after generation. Water agreements, grazing easements, conservation partnerships, agricultural development plans. The family seemed connected to nearly every major land decision in the region. That is unusual, she murmured. One attorney nodded. Very unusual. Another file revealed additional surprises. Several neighboring properties were connected through long-standing cooperative agreements established years earlier. More Dawson signatures appeared. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. The ranch she had initially dismissed as modest now seemed increasingly difficult to define. Later that afternoon, she drove into town to meet with a retired surveyor who had worked throughout the county for more than 40 years. Maps covered the walls of his small office. Historical photographs filled shelves. When Rebecca mentioned Dawson Ranch, the elderly man smiled immediately. That family has been part of this land for longer than most people realize. How long? Rebecca asked. Long enough to shape parts of the county itself. The answer only deepened the mystery. On her way back, Rebecca stopped near a ridge overlooking several valleys. From that vantage point, she could see ranches stretching across the landscape beneath a vast Wyoming sky. The scale was breathtaking. As she studied the terrain, something finally caught her attention. Several of the properties involved in her project connected together in ways she had never fully noticed before. Access routes, water systems, grazing corridors, infrastructure. The pieces fit together like a puzzle. And at the center of that puzzle sat Dawson Ranch. That evening, she arrived unexpectedly at Cole's property. Emma was helping feed horses while Cole repaired a gate. The setting sun painted everything in warm shades of gold. You look like someone carrying questions, Cole said with a smile. Rebecca laughed softly. Maybe I am. Any luck finding answers? She looked at him carefully. The more records I read, the less I understand. Cole rested one hand on the gate. That happens sometimes. Your family appears everywhere. For a brief moment, something thoughtful crossed his face. Not concern, not surprise, recognition. This land remembers a lot of people, he replied. Rebecca waited for more. None came. As always, he seemed comfortable leaving silence where most people would offer explanations. Nearby, Emma laughed as one of the horses nudged her shoulder. The simple moment felt completely disconnected from the growing complexity surrounding the ranch. Yet Rebecca could sense that she was getting closer to something significant. The records were beginning to reveal patterns. The county's history was beginning to reveal connections. And somewhere inside thousands of pages of forgotten documents, a truth was waiting that would soon change everything she thought she knew about Cole Dawson and the land beneath his aging tractor. The situation reached a turning point 3 weeks later. What had once been a promising expansion project now faced a challenge that nobody inside Hayes Agricultural Group had anticipated. Several critical land agreements remained unresolved, and without them, the entire development strategy would lose both efficiency and long-term profitability. Rebecca Hayes sat inside the company's regional headquarters staring at a massive map covering nearly an entire wall. Colored markers identified acquired properties, pending negotiations, infrastructure routes, and future operational zones. One section stood out immediately. A large corridor running through the center of the proposed development remained beyond the company's control. An executive pointed toward it during the morning briefing. Everything comes back to this area. Rebecca folded her arms. Who owns it? The legal director adjusted his glasses. That is the problem. Meaning? The ownership structure is complicated. The answer irritated her. Complicated how? Several documents appeared on the screen. Easements, historical agreements, water access rights, grazing partnerships, conservation provisions. The corridor connected dozens of properties through arrangements dating back decades. Individually, none seemed unusual. Together, they formed a network nobody fully understood. Can we identify the controlling party? Rebecca asked. The legal director hesitated. Not yet. The room fell silent. Outside the conference room windows, Wyoming skies stretched endlessly across the horizon. Inside, uncertainty continued growing. Later that afternoon, Rebecca met with another group of consultants specializing in agricultural infrastructure. Their conclusion only made matters worse. Without access through that corridor, future operating costs increase significantly. How significantly? Rebecca asked. One consultant displayed a projection. The number immediately captured everyone's attention. The increase was substantial. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Rebecca felt genuine pressure. Across the county, life continued normally for Cole Dawson. He spent the morning helping Emma prepare for a school presentation. Later, he met with neighboring ranchers regarding grazing schedules and seasonal planning. The same calm routine continued despite the growing tension surrounding the project. Yet something had changed. More and more people were quietly asking for his opinion regarding future land decisions. Ranch owners, local officials, business leaders. Nobody appeared eager to move forward without understanding where he stood. That evening, Rebecca attended a county economic development meeting. Representatives from agriculture, transportation, education, and local government filled the room. The discussion quickly shifted toward future growth opportunities. As concerns emerged regarding infrastructure coordination, one official finally voiced the question everyone seemed reluctant to ask. Has anyone spoken with Cole? Several heads nodded. Others exchanged knowing looks. Rebecca noticed immediately. Once again, the same pattern appeared. Influence without title. Authority without position. Respect without promotion. After the meeting ended, she stepped outside into the cool evening air. The town square glowed beneath old streetlights. Across the road, she spotted Cole speaking with a group of ranchers. He listened far more than he talked. Yet somehow, every conversation seemed to revolve around him. Rebecca watched quietly for a moment. Then she walked over. Can I ask you something? Cole smiled. You usually do. Why does everyone keep waiting for your opinion? For the first time, he looked genuinely amused. You would have to ask them. I am asking you. Wind moved softly through the trees lining the street. Cole glanced toward the darkening horizon. People are protective of what matters to them. And you? Rebecca asked. His expression became thoughtful. I am protective of what belongs to the future. The answer lingered between them. Simple, mysterious, completely unsatisfying. Yet as Rebecca drove away that night, she could not escape the feeling that events were moving towards something much larger than a land deal. Somewhere hidden inside decades of agreements, records, and forgotten history was a truth that connected the future of her project to the quiet rancher everyone seemed unwilling to ignore. The answer finally arrived on a gray Thursday morning beneath low Wyoming clouds. Rebecca Hayes sat inside a conference room surrounded by attorneys, land specialists, surveyors, and senior executives. Months of research, negotiations, and historical reviews had led to this meeting. On the table sat several thick binders containing ownership records collected from county archives, state registries, and historical land agreements. The atmosphere felt unusually tense. Everyone sensed that an important piece of the puzzle was about to be revealed. A senior attorney stood and opened the first binder. We have completed the final ownership analysis. Rebecca leaned forward, and the attorney projected a series of documents onto a large screen. Property maps appeared first, then water rights agreements, then conservation partnerships. One layer connected to another, parcel after parcel, agreement after agreement. The network stretched across multiple counties. Every new document revealed deeper connections. Rebecca watched carefully as the legal team traced the structure backward through decades of records. Several executives exchanged confused looks. The scope was far larger than anyone had anticipated. Who controls it? Rebecca finally asked. The attorney took a slow breath. That is what surprised us. More documents appeared. Historical trusts, family holdings, agricultural partnerships, long-term stewardship agreements. The room became increasingly quiet. Then the final ownership chart appeared on the screen. At the very center stood a name. Dawson Family Holdings. No one spoke. The attorney continued. The organization controls or influences more than 50,000 acres through direct ownership, conservation agreements, water access partnerships, and multi-generational stewardship arrangements. A stunned silence filled the room. Rebecca stared at the screen. 50,000 acres. The number alone was extraordinary. Yet it was not merely the acreage. It was the influence, the infrastructure, the water systems, the grazing corridors, the interconnected agreements. Everything she had spent months trying to understand suddenly aligned. Another attorney opened a separate file. There is more. Additional documents appeared. Strategic agricultural assets, long-standing partnerships, regional development participation, historical investments supporting local communities, scholarship programs, conservation projects, emergency drought initiatives. The room remained silent. Rebecca felt her earlier assumptions collapsing one by one. She remembered the aging tractor, the worn work jacket, the modest pickup truck. She remembered assuming she understood who Cole Dawson was within the first few minutes of meeting him. Now she realized she had understood almost nothing. Who manages all of this? One executive asked quietly. The attorney looked down at the final page. Cole Dawson. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Outside the windows, wind swept across the Wyoming plains. Inside, the silence felt almost unreal. Rebecca lowered her eyes toward the documents spread before her. For the first time, she understood why local ranchers waited for his opinion, why county officials respected him, why business leaders listened when he spoke, why generations of families trusted him. It had never been about wealth. It had never been about authority. It had been about stewardship, responsibility, legacy. Everything he had said suddenly carried new meaning. Land has a long memory. Responsibility cannot be outsourced. People are protective of what matters to them. The words echoed in her mind. Later that afternoon, Rebecca drove alone toward the Dawson Ranch. The vast landscape rolled endlessly beneath the cloudy sky. In the distance, she saw the familiar tractor moving slowly through a pasture. Cole looked exactly the same as he had on the day they met. Calm, unhurried, ordinary. Yet now she knew the truth hidden beneath that ordinary appearance. And as she watched him working beneath the wide Wyoming horizon, Rebecca realized that the most remarkable thing was not what he owned. It was the fact that he had never once felt the need to tell anyone. The next evening, Rebecca Hayes returned to Dawson Ranch as the sun settled low across the Wyoming horizon. Golden light stretched over the grasslands, turning the rolling hills into waves of amber and bronze. In the distance, she spotted the familiar tractor moving slowly across a pasture. For a moment she remained inside her vehicle, watching quietly. Everything looked exactly as it had on the day they first met. The same ranch, the same tractor, the same man. Only now she understood what she had failed to see. When Cole noticed her approaching, he parked the tractor and stepped down. "You look serious," he said with a small smile. Rebecca laughed softly. "I probably deserve that." They stood together beside the fence while evening wind drifted across the prairie. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Rebecca struggled to find the right words. Boardrooms had never intimidated her. Negotiations had never intimidated her. Yet this conversation felt different. "I read the records," she finally said. Cole nodded. There was no surprise in his expression. "I figured you would." "Why did you never tell me?" she asked. "You never asked." Rebecca looked down briefly before shaking her head. "That is not fair." "Probably not." The smile in his eyes made it impossible to take offense. Silence settled between them. Nearby, Emma was feeding horses while the last sunlight painted the sky behind her. The scene felt peaceful, honest, real. Eventually Rebecca took a slow breath. "When I first arrived here, I thought I understood everything." Cole leaned against the fence. "Most people do. I saw an old tractor. It is an old tractor. I saw a rancher living a simple life. That part is true too." Rebecca laughed despite herself. Then her expression softened. "I judged you." Cole looked across the open range. "You judged what you could see. And I was wrong." The words hung in the air. Cole remained quiet for several seconds before speaking. "A tractor tells you how someone works." Rebecca recognized the sentence immediately. "But not who they are." He nodded. The simplicity of the answer carried more weight than any speech she had heard in a boardroom. Over the following weeks, the relationship between Hayes' agricultural group and local landowners changed dramatically. Instead of pushing forward with plans designed from a distance, Rebecca began listening more carefully to the people who actually lived on the land. Community partnerships expanded. Conservation agreements were strengthened. Long-term stewardship became a central part of the project. The changes earned trust throughout the county. More importantly, they created a better future for everyone involved. As spring turned toward summer, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Emma finished another successful school year. The county scholarship program welcomed a new group of graduates. Ranchers prepared for another season beneath endless Wyoming skies. And every so often, Rebecca found herself returning to Dawson Ranch. Sometimes for business, sometimes for conversation, sometimes simply to sit on the porch and watch the sunset. One evening, as children laughed in the distance and cattle moved slowly across the pasture, Rebecca looked out across the land that had taught her an unexpected lesson. Wealth could impress people. Power could influence people. Titles could command attention. But none of those things created the kind of respect that followed Cole Dawson wherever he went. That came from character, from responsibility, from years of quietly doing what was right when nobody was watching. As the last light disappeared beyond the horizon, the Wyoming prairie grew still. And in that peaceful silence, both of them understood something that would remain long after every business deal had been forgotten. The true value of a person is never found in what they own. It is found in what they choose to protect.